So Tim Pool recently had an interview with Damien Echols from the West Memphis 3, and like usual, aspects of what happened in court and the mental health history of Echols were completely left out, much like the documentaries which completely ignore these aspects. So I'd like to present some things to whoever is watching this, and you can decide for yourself. I am not claiming absolute guilt necessarily, but I believe these are very important things to factor into the bigger picture. So here are some reasons why I distrust Echols and what he says. I will be using clips from the trial where Echols is blatantly caught lying, specifically about his obsession with Aleister Crowley and the occult, a vital part of understanding who Damien Echols is. He openly declares himself a witch and practices magic, so it's a relevant thing to address. We will also take a look at some of his medical mental health records and why his parents had him committed multiple times and claimed to be afraid of him. The idea he was simply falsely accused because he wore black and liked heavy metal and was depressed becomes outrageous when you actually take a look at this public evidence. So let's start off by looking at this clip right here.
You're familiar with a fellow named Aleister Crowley?
I know who he is. I know who he is.
And he's a guy who kind of professes, he's a noted author in the field of satanic worship, right?
I know he is, but I've never saw any of his books personally.
Okay. Not really much of a follower of his?
I would have read them if I would have saw them, but I just never.
Okay. But Aleister Crowley is a guy that, based on his writings, believes in human sacrifice, doesn't he?
He also believed he was God, though.
So he states he never read Crowley, says he would have read him if he would have saw him, which is an odd thing to say. Goes on to state Crowley believes he is God to sort of discredit Crowley in a way. Not sure how someone who hasn't read him even knows this either way. That makes no sense at all. This is an obvious contradiction, and it gets much worse from here. Let's continue.
Doesn't have any particular significance to you?
I know who he is. I've read a little bit about him, but I've never read anything by him.
Okay. Let me show you copy of some documents. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Okay. What is that?
It was this paper I had on different alphabets for like translations where you could write things that nobody could read, and this was one of the forms.
Oh, okay. Well, where did you have that at? When did you do that? Write those things out?
Sometime before I was arrested, I guess.
Okay. Are you sure that you hadn't done those since you were arrested while you've been staying in jail?
I don't know, I might have.
Well, whose names are written on that document?
Mine, Jason's, my son's, one that says Aleister Crowley, and...
Wait, who?
Aleister Crowley.
Now, this is a document that you've written while you've been waiting in jail for trial, right?
If you say so.
Well, you wrote it, correct? That's your writing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You recall when you wrote it?
Not really.
Well, what I'm going to ask you is that this Damien Seth Azariah Echols, your son, he wasn't born until after you were placed in jail, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if you've got his name listed on this document, then this document had to be generated after he was born, right?
Yes.
Okay. So this is something you've written since you've been sitting in here in jail waiting for trial.
Yes.
And what you were doing was writing out various names in different type alphabets, correct?
From the way it looks here, I was practicing, trying to memorize them.
Okay. And one of the names that you picked out to write about was this fellow named Aleister Crowley, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that just a total coincidence? You just pulled his name out of the air?
No, it's just the same book that I had with the different alphabets in it. It also had stuff about him in it.
Well, did you have the book out there at the time you were doing this?
This was just from what I remembered myself, where I was practicing, trying to memorize, get it all in my head perfect.
So he lies about when he wrote it and gets caught in the lie, lies about not really knowing who Crowley is, despite writing in a secret, memorized, coded language about him. Do people typically constantly lie and have the need to code what they are writing while in custody for murder if they are innocent and have nothing to hide? It's pretty outrageous that this is ignored. It gets even worse than this. Let's continue.
Control of the demonic portion of people.
He asked me, did I think there were some people that could not control that side? I said, yes, I guess there is.
It also states that Damien stated that the younger the victim would be more innocent, and in turn more power would be given the person doing the killing.
Right.
Okay. Did you say that?
Yes.
Okay, those are your words.
Mm-hmm.
Did you pick that up when you were studying to be a Catholic?
No. I saw that on several movies, books.
So Damian Echols casually admits to these horrific and disturbing statements about the younger the victim, the more power. Now, no one in their right mind would do such a thing, especially when they are on trial for a heinous crime such as this. Casually says it's a sort of common knowledge because he's seen it in movies and books, acting like everybody knows this or something. Now let's take a look at a line from this Crowley book. You know, the books Echols claimed to have never read, right?
I know he is, but I've never saw any of his books personally.
A male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory and suitable victim. Aleister Crowley. Magic Book 4, Liber Abba. I would call this an ideological smoking gun. Anyone care to explain this away? Lies and contradicts himself, wants to act like he isn't knowledgeable on Crowley while openly and casually making reference to this horrific sick line from a book he hasn't apparently ever read. It's an exact conceptual match from a dude who writes in code about Crowley while he is in custody for an act exactly matching this. I mean, like, really? Really? So let's say it wasn't Echols in the West Memphis 3. What is the statistical likelihood Echols just happened to specifically admit reference to this line in a book and have this ideology? It seems oddly coincidental, doesn't it? Crowley is known as the most wicked man in history, and this is who he openly has emulated his entire life, and it's only increased after his release. And people just seem to think that's irrelevant. It's really mind-boggling. This idea that a corrupt court system and police pressured him into appearing this way is outrageous, in my opinion, of course. Those two girls never recanted their testimony. So let's take a look at just a few of his early medical records and why his parents had him put into mental facilities. Charter Hospital of Little Rock, patient Damien Echols. Chief complaint, they say I suck blood. Let's skip down a paragraph. Damien was placed in the detention center. While at the detention center, he reportedly grabbed a peer and began sucking blood from the peer's neck. According to Damien, he relates that the peer was aware that he was going to do this. Staff reports that Damien was not remorseful for his behavior. Damien indicated that he sucked blood in order to get into a gang. He denies that it was any type of ritual. And Damien reportedly threatened to kill his father while in Oregon and also threatened to eat him. Do I need to say more? I'm going to go to the next document. You can pause and read the entire document yourself if you want. Focus of today's session is spent talking with Damien about his feelings of death. He brought with him to session a poem that he had written during the past week. The theme of this poem centered around death and power. Damien explained that he obtains his power by drinking the blood of others. He typically drinks the blood of sexual partner or of a ruling partner. This is achieved by biting or cutting. He states it makes me feel like God.
He also believed he was God, though, so...
He remembers doing this as far back as the age of 10. He does not remember where he learned to do this. Damien believes that there is no God. He feels that society believes there is a God because society is weak. He wants very much to be all-powerful. He wants very much to be in total control. I think I'll stop there. I think that's enough. I think that paints an accurate picture. You can, again, pause the video and read the entire document yourself if you want, but there is tons of examples like this throughout his entire medical mental health history, which are public record, which you can go read for yourself. So again, does this simply sound like someone who was mildly depressed and wore black and was misunderstood? These are all public records which were used in the trials, and conveniently these hours and hours of documentary that are worshipped by celebrities entirely ignore these facts. Why is that? How does that make any sense at all? So Tim Pool, if you happen to watch this, maybe do some real investigative journalism and not have your points of view spoon-fed to you from the suspect, I mean twice convicted criminal, and the documentaries with clear bias and agenda due to leaving extremely relevant things out like everything I've showed here. In regards to the so-called DNA, which is not body fluid but skin and hair particles, anyone who lives around you and is in contact with you all of the time, say parents in the home touching a kid's clothes and their shoes, etc., can have fragments of their DNA found. These things can be easily planted or found without a complete explanation as to how or when they got there, so it doesn't necessarily prove anything. Perhaps this is why the court systems aren't taking this on as evidence. And again, why was Damien compulsively lying and contradicting himself in court if he is so clearly innocent? An innocent man should be able to openly address all of these questions about his behavior in court and his coded belief system. What is magic? Magic is the act of using language and symbols to manipulate and influence reality to your will. You could describe it as lying in order to influence people's perceptions. Is that not what magicians on the stage do? Play with people's perceptions? So am I wrong for addressing these oddities and asking these obvious questions? The defenders of the West Memphis 3 almost act like a religious cult, like they are so absolutely sure of themselves, any doubt is not tolerated, and they repeat a lot of the same rhetoric. It's like they've had a spell cast on them or something. I don't know. I don't know if I believe in that sort of thing. Maybe I'm wrong though. Probably just a coincidence that Damien Echols claimed that magic saved his life. Anyways, thanks for watching. Bye.
Good the first day. The second day, it didn't look as good because Davis kept trying to trip me up or something.
There was one point in there, though, where he asked you, he says, it looks like you're just changing your story to fit whatever comes up. And you said, yeah.
I was just like halfway listening to him. After I was real nervous when I first got up there, enough to keep my attention focused and everything. But after I was up there a few minutes, just started daydreaming.
Daydream.
If you say so.